Hello everybody, it's Ash from What Culture here, but not currently in What Culture at the moment, as you can probably tell from this background behind me, which is just the spookiest wall I could find in my house to present in front of. So yes, hello MTV, welcome to my crib. If you saw our update video earlier in the week, you'll know we're all working from home at the moment due to world events, and I was previously in the cupboard, but I've come outside just purely so I can flail my arms. It's lovely, all this room, flailing, but regardless of the flailing, it's Wednesday, which means I'm going to bring you some fresh, hot horror content for Ash versus the Evil Wed, as the horrors of Wednesday don't stop, my guys. They always need fighting. Now, this video is a little bit different to the way it would normally be done because it's being filmed in my bedroom for a start, but this is just the introduction and the outro. The middle bit is actually going to be archive footage that I filmed in the office before all of this because it's got a higher production value and it's a bit easier for our editors because it's a bit longer to turn around at the moment as we're doing everything from home. So I hope you don't mind. It's still curated to what you guys have picked, and thank you to Paul J and Kevin Kicker who have suggested body horror lists. So we're going to go with something a little bit similar, which is gross and horrible, and I hope you're not eating dinner or thinking about having a lovely bloody meal, a bloody steak. What else is red and gooey? Some strawberry cheesecake. Don't get eating that right now, guys. Hell no. There's some creepy, horrible stuff about to come up. But yeah, regardless of all that, let's get on with the list. You can catch me in the sidebar if you want to talk to me in the chat on one of these sides. I've lost all sense of direction. I don't really know where I am, but yeah, talk to me in there. We're going to do live premiere stuff. We're going to talk all things horror, have a lovely, lovely time. And this is just going to be how we do the series at the moment for Ash vs. the Evil Wed. So yeah, thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting with me. Please still give us your ideas for what you want for future lists because they're still going to be written up, still going to be turned into lovely, lovely content, still going to work my magic on them. So yeah, your ideas are still paramount. Please give them in. Please tide us over. Thank you again. Here's the list. It is 10 disgusting horror movies you watch and then never forget, which is very dramatic really, but I hope you enjoyed all the same.
10. Hostel, 2005. Eli Roth's Hostel might be one of the most influential horror films of the 21st century. There had certainly been extreme films long before it, but Hostel might be the foremost among the films that established torture porn as a defining horror trend of the 2000s. The film about a bunch of foolish travellers in Europe who get pulled into a torture ring brought this kind of extreme horror to the mainstream, making over $80 million on a small budget. It's scuzzy, bloody, brutal, and perhaps has a purpose. Maybe it's about showcasing the arrogance and entitlement of the developed world. Or maybe we're just meant to enjoy seeing the worst kind of tourists get punished. Maybe it's much more than all that, and maybe it's much less. But was that snipping eyeball scene really all that necessary? Maybe that's kind of the point. Cruelty for cruelty's sake is a theme of the film, and it's something that the film practices on its viewer. Whether it's meant to be sickly pleasurable, completely off-putting, or somewhere in between, that's up to you. Regardless, your first watch of Hostel is one that hangs around the brain like a bad smell. 9. Martyrs, 2008. Martyrs is a beautiful film. It also makes a persuasive case for putting it away and never watching it again. Martyrs might be one of the most famous examples of new French extremity, and the extreme is there for a reason. These films collectively seem to transgress every taboo as horribly as possible, and Martyrs is happy to serve as leader of the pack. The film is relentless, parading violence and torture in front of the viewer like a show-and-tell class gone horribly wrong. It starts with a woman attempting to get vengeance on a well-to-do family she believes tortured her as a child, and just escalates continually from there. The camera lingers over lacerations and flayings and screws bolted to skulls and absolutely relentless beatings. There are few films that make punches feel as bone-crunching and all-around brutal as this film does. It is remarkably unpleasant, but necessarily so, or at least it feels like it by the time we get to its exhausting finale. Martyrs cuts, drills, and hammers home its themes of class-based oppression, the stubborn psychological persistence of violent acts, and perhaps most shocking of all, love. It's the sort of film you want to recommend to friends, but feel horrible doing so. 8. Saw 4, 2007. If Martyrs is violence taken to its most artistic and meaningful, then Saw 4 is just grot in its purest form. The torture had sort of become the point of the Saw franchise after the first film, which, while grimy and full of nasty imagery, was actually somewhat sparse in terms of on-screen graphic violence. By Saw 4, though, the torture had established itself as the centerpiece of the franchise, and this film is perhaps the epitome of that. It has the same tight editing and twisty plot structure that was the series' trademark, and kept moviegoers coming back for film after film. It uses these filmic techniques to bombard the viewer with horrifying imagery, like the opening gambit with a load of sewn shut facial features that definitely shouldn't be. By this point, SAW had clearly established its identity as the franchise to see violence of the most graphic kind. And by this point, you probably knew whether or not this franchise was a brutal ride that you were willing to take. 7. Raw, 2016. Raw is a kind of offshoot of the new French extremity movement, and part of its brilliance is in the way it merges big, over-the-top disgusting imagery with smaller, more relatable moments of bodily harm. In one brilliant scene, we start with a session of bikini waxing gone wrong, which is already stomach-churning and leg-crossing before it takes a swift turn for the more extreme and cannibalistic. Julia Ducournau directs these swift transitions between relatable and extreme grotesquerie in this tale of a vegetarian entering veterinary school and discovering a love for flesh of all kinds, especially tasty human meat. And it does all this horribleness wrapped up in a lovely coming-of-age tale. Without spoiling the film for those who haven't seen it, let's just say that your emotional attachment to a particular character makes the image of her chewing on her own arm much, much more horrifying. It's artful, but not to be watched after a good meal. 6. Starry Eyes, 2014. Starry Eyes has not gotten the attention it deserves. It's very much a come for the bloodbath, stay for the social commentary kind of film, as it follows a young actor who is continually asked how far she will go to achieve the fame that she craves. As we watch her struggle towards her goal, we see her begin to transform. And you obviously didn't listen to the title of this list if you think that that last sentence isn't being at least a little bit literal. The main character must degrade herself emotionally and physically in service of a parasitic Hollywood. Bodies slowly deteriorate in horrifying detail. Suffocations, stabbings, and body horror of all kinds abound in a film that crawls slowly and painfully to an excruciating end where the viewer has already invested too much to then look away. There's just a lot of squelching. It's one of those insidious little films that leaves a massive impact, and it's a kind of disgusting that infects you and makes you feel dirty all over. 5. Green Room, 2015. Green Room has all the scuzziness of a Hostel film and the great effects work to match. It is full of build-up with a group of band members who are barricaded in the green room of a neo-Nazi bar, finding themselves completely unprepared to defend themselves against a well-armed, ruthless foe. When all of that build-up is released, the violence is unsparing and lasting. We see a full range of what machetes, guns, and attack dogs can do to a human body, and the fact that escape seems impossible makes us feel trapped in the viscera that is scattered around the protagonists. It's another film that uses blood and gore to great effect. Green Room puts us in claustrophobic scenarios and then makes them real icky, real fast. It's a film that puts the bloody in bloody good movie, and sticks in your head for as many good reasons as bad. 4. The Last House on the Left, 1972. Wes Craven's notorious film shocked moviegoers with its frank depiction of violence that somewhat mirrored the more unfiltered way the Vietnam War was in consciousness. The film is taboo central, from sexual assault to bodily mutilation, making an uneasy mix of violence and emotional destruction. Much like Green Room would do 40 years later, Last House on the Left forces the viewer into the emptiness of its own violence. The exploitation just feels wrong, and is simply violence begetting violence in a horrific cycle where there is no sense of order. That the pain is drawn out, often sexual, and too realistic leaves one feeling ill for so many reasons. It is not a nice movie. Some films try and make a chainsaw going ham seem cathartic in a way, but in this film it's an almost meaningless exercise, a reflection of the most disgusting aspects of our own world. 3. Imprint, 2006. Takashi Miike, the prolific, transgressive filmmaker who actually cameoed in Hostel, made this film for Showtime's Masters of Horror, an anthology series where famous horror directors were given creative freedom to make a film of their choosing. He chose to make his about an American returning to an island dominated by prostitution, to save a lover who has apparently died by suicide in his absence. However, despite attempts to edit the film's content, which includes torture, disfigurement, and detailed medical abnormalities, it was deemed too extreme for Showtime, and was never aired on the network in the United States. Miike is an inspiration for directors like Eli Roth, who admire his transgressive filmmaking, which is all on display in this downright emotionally scarring film, which seemingly goes out of its way to cross as many taboos as possible in its short 53-minute runtime. Worse still, the film narrates its gruesome events, and then goes back over and revises that narrative, adding more disgusting details each time it repeats, pulling us further and further into the horrific mess of this perverse plot. 2. Audition, 1999. MIKE was asked to direct an episode of Masters of Horror due to his horror credentials, and this film, Audition, is probably the centerpiece of his reputation. Audition is the story of a man who gets involved with a woman hiding dark secrets. These secrets then emerge in a disgusting, visceral display of imagery and some innovative, painful violence. That is about all that can be said without ruining the twists and turns of the narrative, though if you have heard about this film before, you probably have a good idea of what's coming. Its last act is horrible, but what the finale is preceded by is fairly tame. It's enough to leave you wondering where the piano wire, acupuncture, and vomit that made the film famous actually is, and then it hits. The film goes mad, and the already uncomfortable setup and misogyny of the first half of the film gets wrapped up in a flurry of severed limbs and spew-based horror. It is truly unnerving in its suddenness, resulting in either a shock if you don't know what's coming, or an experience of anxiety as you wait for that disgusting end. It's unsurprising then that MIKE was such an influence on the torture films to come in the 21st century. 1. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Tobe Hooper's film is a bit of an outlier in this list in that there's not much actual brutal violence on screen. That's not to say that the other films on this list don't use the power of suggestion to great effect, but the upset feeling in the viewer's stomach doesn't really come from viscerally depicted blood and gore for this film in particular. However, the film is often still seen as disgusting, blood-soaked horror. That is for a few reasons, not the least of which is the fact that the setting of the film, an apparently abandoned house in Texas summer, just seems like an awful place to be. It grapples with a more familiar kind of disgusting, the sticky, fly-buzzing heat that most of us have experienced at some point. It's just a really gross place to be in, and you can feel the sweat and grot that comes off it. And then the cannibals come in. Even if we don't actually see much violence, it feels real. Probably another offshoot of the real-world violence people had greater access to since the Vietnam War was beamed to televisions daily. Yes, every 70s horror is about the Vietnam War. There you have it.
And that's our list. What did you think about that blast from the past content and this present from the present? I worked really hard on that line. Let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget to let me know what you want to see in the weeks to come too. Still making content, still looking at lovely horror stuff to put together, so I want to know what you think you want to see, basically. Let me know, write about it, let me write about it. Tell me, please comment. Go on. Anyway, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, sacrifice your firstborn child to the overlords of what culture, and please come back again next week as this is still going on, still coming hot and fresh, now from my bedroom, which I hope you've enjoyed. Please tell me how great this tapestry is, because I think it's pretty dang cool. Catch me on Twitter @AshMillman. If not, I'll see you again next week, please. Thank you. Goodbye.